Welcome to the Collab Facilitator training on gaining traction on the big picture, the full spectrum of organizational power sharing. Thanks for being here today. I'm Cecile Green, one of the co-founders of Round Sky Solutions and the developer of Collab, and I'm delighted to be here with my colleagues, Charlotte Root, Rebecca Fisher-McGinty, and Sarah Mihalik today. I wanted to start by giving you an overview of what we'll be doing today in this recording. We'll begin with a review of what we've learned in this course by exploring Collab through the metaphor of a whole canoe, or a complex adaptive system for self-organizing teams. We'll then take a look at the parts of Collab's canoe in order to situate your learning in the larger arc of collaborative leadership development before we do a high-level tour of the other key practices for self-organizing teams. We'll then take a look at a few examples of what Collab enables for organizations and wrap up with some thoughts on what's next for your leadership capacity building and some questions and comments. By now, we hope you've watched all of the other training videos in the course and have experimented with the standard meeting practice in your team. The standard meeting practice is one of Collab's suite of meeting practices that collaboratively enable all of the conversations every organization needs to have in order to succeed. The metaphor I'd like to use for how this works is a canoe. A canoe really enables a paddler, or paddlers really, to cross bodies of water carrying loads that would be impossible without them. And from a minimally sufficient perspective, a moving canoe, or any boat, has four basic elements: a hull, seat, oars, and the humans that power those oars. With these basic elements synthesized into a whole, humans mastered the seas and enabled global travel. Collab, as a self-organizing operating system, really enables an organization to more effectively and efficiently cross the water. Now, an organization may still be in rough seas and fighting in headwind. In other words, Collab doesn't fix all organizational challenges, especially external ones, but it does give us the tools for making use of those challenges and opportunities collaboratively by being a whole canoe for communication. So what are all the parts of the canoe? Let's go over each of these one by one in greater detail so you can see how they all fit together to distribute power and leverage shared leadership. First of all, let's start with the core roles of scope lead, scope rep, facilitator, scribe, metrics, and crosslink. These really function to hold the fundamental leadership accountabilities of every scope, creating space for the participatory activity to unfold. And these really are the ribs of the canoe. They hold that space. The skin or the shell of the canoe is the scope mission, essentially its boundary of authority and accountability, the membrane within which the activity of self-organizing can occur. It forms a thin but solid barrier that enables all of the work of a scope to occur. The oars that propel us forward relate to the standard meeting practice, pulling our future into view through raising and processing of tensions repeatedly over time. The way that we track our information forms the seats upon which we can confidently rest as we mobilize the oars. And then, of course, there's us, the people, the ones putting the time, creativity, and energy into an organization, energizing those oars and moving the canoe across the water. So in this training, we wanted to set you up to be able to experiment with the standard meeting practice in your team. And in order to do that, we gave an introduction to Collab's big picture, including why Collab matters. In lesson 1, the introduction to Collab, including the conceptual lenses of the power matrix and the 7 conversations. We then discussed the perspective of personal development as a foundational element of effective self-organizing in lesson 2, building your skills as a facilitative leader. And in lesson 3, facilitating shared power, leading the standard meeting practice, we introduced you to the facilitation fundamentals of this participatory leadership practice. But facilitation is really only one of the 7 core roles. So in lesson 4, we dug into the essentials of scribing the standard meeting practice, including the relevance of outputs and the systems for information tracking. In lesson 5, sharing power through effective decision-making through integrative consent, we gave a detailed introduction to this rapid form of deliberative decision-making, including a demo. To this, we added details on roles and scopes in lesson 6, which was about high-performing self-organizing accountability systems, distributing power through roles, including what they are and how to collectively create and iterate them. We followed this by how to create a collaborative accountability system using those same roles you just created in lesson 7, the lesson about collaborative accountability systems. These lessons contain all the basics you need to conduct the standard meeting practice, with governance and operational tensions, the most common types of tensions. But those are not the only kind of conversations that organizations need to have. And essentially, these 7 conversations you see on the screen are all required to work together in order to produce an effective self-organizing team. They just happen a little less frequently. And in addition to governance and operations, we really need to also talk about our purpose, which is our vision, mission, and values, our business model, our strategy, our interpersonal, and the personal development. So in order to make use of the range, really the full range of organizational conversations, you'll need to learn the other processes, and that's our goal here today, to give you a high-level understanding of these practices. When you're ready to go deeper, you can check out the cards for any of these processes and attend further in-depth trainings, including our certification program. So let's take a look at each of these other practices, starting with the purpose conversation. And I'd love to hear from all of you on the call. Can you take a moment to share your experience of working in an organization that did not have clarity on its purpose, and what impact that had on your work as a team?
Sure, I'll start. Thanks, Cecile. Purpose is so important to a team's direction. And I have been in an organization before that had almost too much purpose. I worked for a nonprofit that really had trouble finding a clear and direct purpose because there was so much need and lack of resources in the community. And so we wanted to fix it all, in a sense. What we wanted to be was a functional hub that provided more than we actually had capacity to do. Yeah. And so looking back now, I realized that this broad purpose made it difficult for us to be clear about what our priorities were and as a team, and often led to disagreement about what to spend our time on and how to use our resources. And also, when we weren't working as a team, how to make autonomous decisions.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great example, Rebecca. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, thanks, Cecile. I can really relate to what Rebecca's talking about. I'm on the board of a small nonprofit that has 3 sort of main purpose statements. The first is to steward land that they own. The second is to support nonviolent activism in Vermont. And the third is to be an educational institution. And these 3 purposes are really so broad, they can kind of encompass anything that we can think of. So that creates difficulty. And in that organization, I've also sometimes liked having such a broad purpose. And I feel like we maybe more often get stuck when we're trying to create strategy and trying to remember that we can't fulfill our whole mission and vision in the next 6 months, that we really need to kind of narrow it down. And then in other political organizations that I've been a part of, I have really found that the purpose conversation has sort of highlighted very real political differences amongst different members of the group. And that the lack of kind of an open dialogue and conversation about this has really gotten in the way of some of our strategic decision making. So I'm excited to hear more about the purpose meeting practice.
Thank you, Sarah. How about you, Charlotte?
Yeah, of course. I think that having a clear vision, mission, and values is so important to every organization. And I think it is really, really lacking, especially in my experience in the smaller bits of each organization. You know, if you're talking about a larger organization, it's tough to figure out where a department, for example, fits in, and what the mission of that department really is, and being able to count on the work that that department is doing and being able to make plans based on that clear purpose. You know, as we know in Collab, each scope has to have a clear mission, and I think that's really lacking in understanding in the broader scope of organizations.
Yeah, great example, Charlotte. And likewise, it's transformative when an organization can define the mission for every one of its scopes or departments, its teams, however you reference that body, doesn't matter, but having a clear mission for those enables us to self-organize within them. And without that clear boundary, it can get really messy really quickly to try to enable more self-organizing or collaborative ways of working. So thank you all for those examples. And in the purpose conversation, we're really seeking to understand, evolve, and articulate why our organization or our team exists, what value it hopes to contribute, through which mechanisms, and within which values. We begin our purpose conversation by looking at our current state and then brainstorming questions related to our vision, mission, and values before synthesizing the brainstorm into new potential versions. Our collective proposal, we then create and pass through integrative consent. For outputs of the purpose conversation, we get a new or updated vision, mission, and set of values with metrics, really ways of measuring these differences that we intend to make so we can track our progress over time. The next conversation is the business model, in which we innovate our approaches to delivering our value. And we do this transparently through the input of the whole organization. It's also really helpful to start our business model conversations with a clear sense of where we are currently at through the current state process. After which, a series of brainstorming, synthesizing, scenario building exercises get us to a new proposal for our model, which we then collectively pass using integrative consent. Sometimes the business model conversation brings up questions for people. It's a pretty detailed conversation, ultimately. And I'm just curious if any of you have questions at this time.
I have a question. So back to my nonprofit example, what if in a nonprofit we don't sell anything? Do we still have to have a business model?
Such a great question. And the short answer is absolutely. Every organization, no matter how big or no matter what its legal structure is, or how small it is, has a business model, which the business model is essentially just sort of explains how an organization exchanges value with its environment. And so for a nonprofit, your revenue streams, the way in which you receive money back to support the good work you're doing, is through funding, through grants. And so that's essentially the source of your revenue, which gets factored into the business model. And yes, the model is absolutely essential for every organization, no matter its legal structure.
Thanks, Cecile. That's really helpful. I have a little bit different question. I'm wondering how the business model in Collab is different from a more traditional business plan that you would get from, a bank or a small business program.
Yeah, another great question. Thank you, Sarah. And I think I'd like to start by talking about how it's the same first, in the sense that a business model produces projections for the purposes of understanding how the various ways in which our revenue streams are going to support us and the expenses we're going to have, just in a very, very nutshell. And our business plans essentially do the same. They provide us with a sense of where this is going financially and give us opportunities to spot holes and problems in advance. So in those ways, it's similar. Business plans also typically ask us to think about things like our marketing plan, our strategy, and what our management plan is. And in Collab, our business model really asks us to look in depth at all of the aspects that will relate to the financial ins and outs of the business. So this includes things like, what is our marketing plan, and who are the customers we're serving, and what are our projections related to that. But what makes it different is that it's a living document. And so in addition to sort of asking some questions that a traditional plan wouldn't, the business model enables us to maintain a living record and have a real life conversation about our business model, our business plan ongoingly. And so it's the document into which we're putting all of our profit and loss information, our balance sheet information, so that we can compare with our projections how we're doing. And so in a sense, it's a living business plan, which most business plans aren't. They're usually produced as a one-off document that enables you to get funding or to graduate from your course.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer your question, Sarah?
Yeah, thanks. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also wondering if you have any tips or advice on how to get a team that's maybe not as comfortable looking at and developing an understanding of numbers into this conversation.
Great question, Charlotte. And frankly, it's really important to build that capacity in an organization of financial understanding. This really enables us to use our collective intelligence around our business model better. And so the key thing here is to treat this as an ongoing learning opportunity. Some of us are going to walk in with more knowledge than others, and we become the ones that can provide explanation and details to those of us who maybe don't have or haven't had the opportunity to kind of gain that knowledge. And through having business model reviews, monthly ideally, quarterly if that makes more sense for you, but on a regular recurring basis, those business model reviews provide an opportunity to train our entire team in understanding what's going on in our model so that they can provide valuable input in terms of evolving our model going forward. Well, thank you all for those questions. Let's take a few minutes and talk about strategy. And just a quick disambiguation. Often people, when they use the term strategy, conflate it with business model. So they think of strategy and they think of, it's the same thing as our model. And in Collab, we have separated those two ideas. And the business model really becomes kind of the architectural plan, our intention for what we would like to see unfold for ourselves. And the strategy becomes the set of priorities or initiatives, the plan, the work plan for getting from where we are towards that model. So they're really two different kinds of conversations that deeply interrelate. And in strategy, we're really talking about our priorities. So we may have business models that are going to take a long time to unfold, maybe 5 years or something. And in strategy, we're going to identify how to focus. So we begin by kind of examining the plans we've set forward in our business model and then define the initiatives that are going to be required to attain our plans. These initiatives become our collective priorities to which our projects and next actions can be aligned on a daily basis. Our strategy conversation also requires that we have a keen understanding of our current state, in light of which we can then brainstorm options for initiatives, synthesize those options to a clear set of initiatives with metrics, and then collectively consent on those priorities. So do any of you have an example of being part of a team with a well-articulated strategy, and what did that feel like for both you and the rest of your team?
Yeah, actually I do. I was working with an organization just a few years ago that developed a clear strategic plan, like a 3-month strategic plan. And we did it collectively. And so we all really knew what it was. And then we posted it on the wall, and we kind of tried to keep up with it weekly with our meetings. And what that did for us was really united us in our vision of where we were heading on the short-term basis. It gave us a place to check to see if what we were doing was aligned with the whole group. And it gave us motivation to succeed at the metrics that we had identified, which really helped us to stay focused on a daily basis, rather than kind of being distracted by all the many other things that, I'm sure every organization, but also this organization in particular, was faced with, daily, with the opportunities and struggles. It's hard to stay focused sometimes, but when you have that posted up and, for everyone to see and everyone checks in on it, really makes a difference.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Charlotte. How about you, Rebecca?
Thanks. Yeah. So I worked for a company that did youth training, and we taught them how to do energy audits and retrofits, and also had educational life training. And with that job, it was so clear what our strategy was. It was short term, so it was easy for us to measure if we were being successful or not. And also not only measure like they did this many audits, but also to think about the less tangible ways that we were having an impact. So it was very like multiple ways of measuring, which was awesome. And I just remember my co-manager and I having so much clarity about how to spend our time and how to shift things if it wasn't going well. And it just felt great to be in a work environment that was so clear around strategy.
Thank you. That's lovely. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah. I feel sort of nostalgic about this time period in my life. I had the opportunity for about 2 years to work with a pretty small 5-person team that was building an environmental justice campaign. And we were just always so clear about our short-term strategy and what our priorities were for the upcoming weeks and months. And we had these weekly meetings that were just like my favorite meetings I've ever been a part of, where we'd kind of review this in a pretty informal way and adjust, once one part of the strategic initiatives were, had been completed and we needed to choose a new one, or if we had a new opportunity come up. And it just really felt like we were all just running really fast together. And it was really one of the best experiences of my life. And I'm kind of always looking to duplicate this in other organizations and haven't found that. And I think that part of why we were able to, come to such clear strategic alignment was because we were a really small group. There was only 5 of us, and we were a relatively homogenous group. Like we were all similar ages, had similar experience levels, education levels, similar class and race, cultural backgrounds, and our political analysis was really overlapped a lot. And all of our personalities were kind of like a linear, verbal, organized type of personality. And as our group grew and we had more diversity, that was a huge strength of our group to grow and bring in more people. But it also made it trickier to get to such clear alignment on strategy without having much process. So I think that having a tool like Collabs to help a larger team get on the same page with strategy would have been really helpful for us to do more regularly.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, strategy is powerful, and it also really helps to reduce overwhelm, even when an organization is kind of in the midst of a lot of crunch. So there's a lot of benefits to it. Thank you all for your examples. So let's talk next about some governance. Governance really is the conversation that gets all of our agreements about who has authority to do what with what accountabilities in any team or scope. And it's largely addressed through the standard meeting practice. And in the standard meeting practice, we use integrative consent to create our new shared agreements. The other conversations that occur in the standard meeting practice is the operations conversation. And this is really about all of our daily details, all the projects, the next actions that we need to deliver on. And as we discussed in detail in the training on collaborative accountability systems, our operational conversations occur through open discussion, with the outputs being next actions and next projects. The interpersonal meeting practice really enables a team to resolve interpersonal conflict by taking time to hear each other out and validate our experiences. We usually start the interpersonal with an appreciation round, helps to build the interpersonal, and then follow that with interpersonal tension clearing, a process of sharing and mirroring that validates and restores relationship. And last but not least, we have the personal development meeting practice, which we shared in lesson 2. And this enables a team to support each other in the development of shared leadership skills and capacities through regular program reports, opportunities to evolve our topics, current way understanding, and practice development. And the outputs of personal development are individual growth and an increase in the interpersonal as we support and challenge each other to become all that we can be. As I mentioned, when you are ready, you can access all the details of these practices in the Collab cards, which is located in the course portal. So let's take a few minutes and talk about some examples of how the whole canoe works in action. When all the organizational conversations are working together, we get some really interesting changes and benefits, and these are just a few examples that you see on the screen of changes we've seen in organizations that have implemented Collab. First of all, organizations are really able to reorganize fluidly by clearly defining the scope missions and electing leads and reps. This enables an organic, self-organizing evolution of the organizational structure. Workers are also able to build an ownership culture through practicing participatory mechanisms for making and enacting decisions together on a daily basis. We also get more innovation and adaptability in our business models, and we have leadership development built into the fabric of day-to-day work life, increasing capacity ongoingly. We also see the ability to achieve supportive, nourishing, and productive organizational cultures. So as we begin to wrap up here, I'd like to open up for any questions about what we've shared so far in this video.
Yeah, I have a comment first and then a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I just wanted to mention that I think that having this kind of set of practices laid out is so empowering for a team, and the empowerment really comes from the practice of presencing with your group in the present moment and developing a plan on what you want to be and how you want to get there together, that's also able to evolve based on whatever changing conditions may come up. I think that really removes a lot of the fear that prevents people from engaging fully in leadership in their lives and in their businesses. I think that fear really runs a lot of people's lives, and having a clear strategic way of taking these conversations on really allows people to engage more fully with themselves and with each other. So I think that that's amazing and totally empowering.
Yeah.
My question is, how often do you recommend visiting these conversations, like the purpose, business model, and strategy? It seems like sometimes maybe it's done too infrequently, so it maybe gets out of date, and if it's done too often, it may be hard to get work done with that kind of the plan always being changing.
Yeah, great question, Charlotte. And the short answer is that I recommend identifying when to change your vision, mission, and values, or have any of the other conversations based on the tensions that are surfacing in the organization. So if you're using the standard meeting practice, one of the things that's happening regularly is that we all get to identify items that we believe will help us be a better organization, that will move us forward. And based on that, we set essentially as tensions around purpose come up or business model come up, that's when we address them. So we're always sort of staying requisite to what's up for the organization at any time. And it tends to eliminate that like underdoing or overdoing if we have that tension surfacing process built into our regular meeting practice.
Totally. That makes total sense. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm really so glad that Collab includes the interpersonal practices as part of the organizational process. I think that that's like really pretty unique in Collab. And in my experience, interpersonal dynamics, especially conflict and harder interpersonal dynamics, have such a huge impact on a team. So I'm excited to look more at the cards and practice this more in depth. And kind of like what Charlotte was asking, how often do you recommend that this come up? Is it for every little tiny tension and conflict, or is it kind of reserved for the bigger ones that are having a big impact on the team? And how do you suggest bringing this into a group that's struggling with conflict that maybe has been going on for a while and isn't going to be resolved in one meeting practice?
Yeah, great questions. Let me start first with the question about how often and like what type of tensions are, do we use the interpersonal tension clearing process for? And in short, we're looking for the tension surfacing process to drive the frequency, but we're especially looking for tensions that are emotional in nature between individuals on a team. The caveat with this is that, especially when starting with a team that has had a long history of conflict and is perhaps embroiled in multiple layers of conflict currently, just stepping in and starting with that emotional tension is not often the best way to go. I usually recommend starting with the standard meeting practice and surfacing whatever tensions are there, but focusing on the ones that are governance in nature or operational in nature first. Frankly, 90% of the tensions in a team, even though they can come to be an emotionally fraught territory, often have their roots in these other conversations. So for example, people don't know what their roles are, and they're frustrated all the time, not really knowing who. They think I should do it, or I think someone else should do it. And that generates this emotional tension, which is really overlaid on top of the deeper tension that we don't know what our roles are. We have not consented on them. Same thing with operations. If we don't have a clear strategy or we are not regularly reporting on our projects, we're guaranteed to have conflict, and that will become emotional in nature at some point. Mm-hmm. And so the key is to start first with your governance and operational tensions for a new team. Get a bunch of those processed and see what's left. See what's left that is still really kind of hot in terms of the emotions, and then use the interpersonal process. Once you're doing these things regularly, tensions that might have created conflict in the past are simply easily resolved and no longer kind of creating this long tail of emotional disturbance in a team.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound nice?
Doesn't it?
That's really great. Thanks, Cecile. I'm also, just through this whole process of the course, it's been really great to be learning how these different practices interrelate more, and to hear from you about that. And it also leaves me with more questions. Mm-hmm. And so I was wondering, I'm sure I'm not the only person, so I was wondering if you could point people to where they go from here to learn more about how to bring Collab into their work or their life, or however that looks for them.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. And in short, the place that I'd first point you to is make sure you've watched all of the training sessions in Collab 101, all of the videos, and taken a look at all of the materials and put those to use in your team. It's a great place to start. Standard meeting practice really is the heartbeat or the backbone of good practices for organizational communication. So start there. And when you're really ready to learn more about Collab, say some of the other conversations like purpose or strategy or business model, please check out our Collaborative Leadership Certification Program, which is a transformative collaborative leadership development program. And it covers all of the aspects from personal development to purpose generation. The Collaborative Leadership Certification Program will enable you to dig deeper into facilitation skills. You get a lot of practice. You'll understand how to conduct a full purpose process or strategic planning, and master some skills at interpersonal conflict resolution. And if you'd like your whole organization to kind of become immersed in these practices and you'd like some individualized help, we're here to support you with that. We work one-on-one with you through our customized trainings to build a program that's uniquely suited to your environment and to help you implement these practices throughout your organization, including impact its structure. So as we wrap up here, I just want to remind you to share your questions and comments on the forums in the course portal. As you try to apply the standard meeting practice in your team, questions are going to come up that are unique to your situation, and the forums are there for you to ask them and to also attend the regular calls and bring your questions up there. And this is the last in our series of training videos. We hope you've enjoyed them all. Please do reference the rest of the trainings in the course portal. And if you found this course helpful, transformative, perspective shifting, please do share this opportunity with your communities. Thanks so much for joining us.